Hello, fellow lovers of the liminal and the weird, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Right now, spooky season is in full swing. I've been reading wonderful, wonderful horror stories. I've read House on the Borderland by William Hope Hodgson. I've read The Wendigo by Algernon Blackwood, and I'm just starting H.P. Lovecraft's The Color Out of Space. It's been great. I love this season. It's one of my favorite seasons. I know you love this season too. And what I want to do today is go over my favorite horror novels that I've read on the channel so far. So let's jump into it. We're going to start with a prolific horror writer, one who passed recently, and that is Peter Straub. And I want to look at his first horror novel named Julia. Now, Peter Straub did write a few novels before Julia. They were not in the horror genre, at which point either he or his publisher, I don't know exactly which story is more true, decided that the real money was in horror and that Peter Straub should try out his hand at that. And he did with Julia. This is a wonderful and what I feel often overlooked novel by a great master. I've always felt Peter Straub was kind of overlooked, especially his early stuff. I really enjoy. Now, Julia, his first horror novel, is a ghost story, and it is, in my opinion, probably the most realistic look at what it would do to somebody's psychology to see actual evidence and proof of haunting in their everyday lives. And of course, Julia thinks that she is going absolutely insane as this and so does everybody around her as this novel progresses. In a weird way, it's a magical realism novel for that, just because of how realistically he looks at what a haunting would do to somebody. Absolutely incredible. I try not to do this, but this is a book that I do have 2 copies of because I absolutely love this paperback copy. I think it's a much, much better picture than this one is. Also, you will notice that the name here is different, Full Circle. This has something to do with the movie, which I have here called The Haunting of Julia. This is a 4K version. It's called The Haunting of Julia or for Full Circle. I don't know why this book has so many different titles and names, but it does. Good movie. I wish they would have taken the scares a little bit more seriously in this movie, but other than that, it captures the kind of terrifyingness of what a haunting would do to somebody. Not as good as the novel, but close. Really fun. So, yeah, Julia by Peter Straub was a great, great novel. Next up, we have a set of books, or a book that I discovered from Paperbacks from Hell. Paperbacks from Hell was such a huge phenomenon that every Halloween I pull it out and lovingly look through those pages because it was just such an incredible book. And it's the book that introduced me to a writer named Michael McDowell, who I had not heard of. Michael McDowell is most famous for being the screenwriter for Beetlejuice, but what Paperback from Hell introduced me to was Blackwater. Blackwater is a thick, thick novel. I only have the first 3 here. There's 3 more, and I'm slowly collecting them. I listened to this story through the incredible Audible collection that they have. The Audible is really good. There are versions of this that have the first 3 in 2 volumes, and the first 3 in 1 volume and the second 3 in another volume. And there's one that has them all in 1 volume. This is a Southern Gothic story that starts with a flood in a small southern town, and 2 men on a boat are rowing around in the floodwaters checking damage. The downtown hotel has been covered up to water up to the 2nd, almost 3rd floor. And when they row by the building, they see that there's a woman in there that asks them to rescue her. And this woman, there's really no way she could have survived this flood staying in that hotel room for that many days without fresh water. But she seems fine, and they take her into town, and she slowly finds her way into high society in that town. This is simultaneously a gruesome monster story and a family epic spanning generations. It is not as horror as you think it is, nor is it as drama as you think it is. It's somewhere in between those two things, and it is really, really worth a read. Absolutely incredible book. And you can get it on Audible for, I think, $1 and just listen to the whole story. And the narrator on Audible is absolutely incredible. Next up, we have Ring by Koji Suzuki. This is the novel, of course, that spawned the blockbuster movies. First a TV movie in Japan, then a theatrical release in Japan, eventually became a movie here in America. This story really revolutionized horror for me specifically, because when I was a teenager, I read nothing but horror, and then I moved on and left horror behind. And then in 2002, I saw The Ring, and the American Ring, and it was absolutely incredible. And then I read this crazy novel, and this novel is not as horror. I mean, all the elements of the horror are there, but there's also a science fiction element in this that I don't think any of the movies have done justice, where the videotape is compared to a virus. It really is haunting using technology. It's sci-fi horror. It's incredible. If you've seen the movies and you love them, there's so much more in this book. Very much worth a read. Next up is another more modern one, and that is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I read all 4 books in the Southern Reach series, and for me, nothing ever was as good as this one. I know some people disagree with that, but just speaking about this novel, which I feel is a standalone novel, one you can just read and leave it at that. You don't have to move on to all the Southern Reach stuff if you don't want to. This, in my opinion, is some of the best modern cosmic horror I've ever read. It is absolutely incredible. At the moment in this story where writers in the past would have ended their story and said what this character saw was so indescribable that they went insane. At that moment in this story, Vandermeer doesn't flinch. He writes out the weird. He doesn't let he doesn't let himself use the trope of cosmic horror and just saying, imagine it yourself because it's so terrifying. He writes a description of the unexplainable, indescribable horror that allows you to still have the mystery and indescribable horror in your head, but also his view of it. And Vandermeer, I think, flexing a little bit, not only does this once, he does this twice. The character goes a certain direction and has to turn around and come back up and go past again this unspeakable cosmic horror. He explains it twice. This novel is genius. It's one of the scariest modern cosmic horror tales that I've read in a long time. Absolutely worth the read. The rest of the Southern Trilogy stuff has some good moments, but not one of the books is as solid as this is all the way through. If you haven't read this one, you absolutely should. Next is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is one of my favorite horror books of all time. I even love that cover. Yeah, this is the story. It's about a crime that occurs in a small town and the effects it has on the people related to the crime afterwards and how the town treats them afterwards. But it's also about the people involved in the crimes' unique mindsets. It is a subtle novel, but it is a terrifying novel. And watching my channel, I'm sure you know that I love a little bit of subtlety in my horror. Just the hint of things not being right is enough to start getting me creeped out. I love Haunting of Hill House, but I think this takes it. I think this is a little bit better than Haunting of Hill House, in my opinion. Maybe that'll start a fight in the comments. I'm sorry if it does, but yeah, that one I really love. And now for a classic. My favorite vampire novel of all time is Carmilla by J. Sheridan Le Fanu. Of course, Lord Byron and Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley all had a bet together. I don't know if it was a bet to see who could write the best scary story. And Lord Byron decided he was going to take this ancient legend of the vampire and update it by making the vampire kind of a modern gentleman. He only wrote a few pages of verse of his novel. His physician, who was also there, John Polidani, I believe his name is, took that idea and wrote a short story or a novella that was published that really revolutionized how people thought of vampires. And then we got stuff like Varney the Vampire, and eventually we got Carmilla, who was the same idea but a female vampire. And this book is about this female vampire insinuating herself into kind of an isolated situation with a couple of people from Europe that are staying in the town where Carmilla died. And she ingratiates herself into that home and into the heart of the young woman that's living there. This is a sexual book. This is a book with gay themes. And really, truly, in my opinion, this is a better written vampire story than Dracula. Speaking of fights in the comments, I would take this over Dracula anytime. I feel like Bram Stoker kind of loses his way in Dracula. The story is solid, and it's, of course, a classic for a reason, but it's slow. It meanders in places that I find very difficult to get through, whereas this one is concise. It has an economy of language, and the imagery is absolutely beautiful. It's incredible. Irish writer Le Fanu that obviously inspired Bram Stoker to write Dracula. So this is the earlier piece, and in my opinion, the better piece. Absolute must read. Next up, we have Conjure Wife by Fritz Leiber. This is a book that was written in the early 40s and is about a couple, a husband and a wife, and the husband is a professor, and he's a rationalist. He believes only in what can be seen and proven. And he finds out one evening that his wife is practicing witchcraft. And he, in a fit of rage, demands as the man of the house that she no longer practices witchcraft and makes her throw away all the witchcraft protections and stuff around the house. And then she falls asleep and he finds one last protection thing on him and his jacket, if I remember correctly, and throws that into the fire. And as the novel continues, strange things start to happen. His career starts falling apart. All the things that seem to happen so easily for him aren't happening so easily. And it's slowly revealed that witchcraft is all around him. And that maybe his wife was protecting him from that. Wonderful, wonderful book written in the early 40s that looks at men and women in a very unique way. I really enjoyed this novel. It was scary. It was fun. There's been a couple of movies made about it that were good. Yeah, definitely worth a read. All right, going back to Paperbacks from Hell, we have Elizabeth Engstrom's When Darkness Loves Us. Now, I'm going to credit Paperbacks from Hell for this, because when I saw it in Paperbacks from Hell, I was like, wow, I've never heard of that, but it sounds incredible. But the truth is, when I read this, there's 2 novellas in this. When I read the first novella, I felt like it was very familiar to me. When I read the second novella, I remembered it so well that I was able to remember all the plot points in it. So I actually did read this when I was a teenager, which kind of blows my mind, because it means I had a copy of this very hard to find book back in the day. The first novella in this opens with a young woman who is just recently married and is super excited to start her life with this man that she absolutely loves. And she goes into this little tunnel area where she used to have tea parties as a kid and gets locked in there. And this, as she turns and goes further and further into this tunnel, she realizes this huge complex of tunnels, and she is stuck down there. And it just ratchets up and up and up from there. This is short, like a little over 100 pages, hard-hitting, and one of the best reads. Like every time somebody says, what's the best horror gem you found from Paperbacks from Hell, I love Blackwater, but I'll send people here first. This is incredible. Elizabeth Engstrom deserves a lot more attention. What a book this was. Absolutely outstanding. Check it out whenever you get the chance. It's really worth it. Next up is another subtle horror writer. I've got a couple in a row here. I connect this a little bit into being similar to We Have Always Lived in the Castle. This is Joan Lindsay's Picnic at Hanging Rock. The story of a Valentine's Day picnic of young girls from a local boarding house, or college, as they call it in the book here, that go to this volcanic structure out in the bush, this natural volcanic structure out in the bush, and 3 of the young girls disappear, and the mystery of what happened to them. I grew up with the Peter Weir Picnic at Hanging Rock, which is a 1975 film that I really enjoyed. And one of the things that I loved the most about it was the mystery that this was a real-life event, which, of course, now we know it was not. Joan Lindsay let that belief exist for many years, and I think it's one of the reasons that this book became so popular. But eventually she admitted that, of course, this is completely fiction, but still an incredible novel. I spoke about it recently on this channel with Deb, the omnivorous reader, who herself is from Australia, and it was a very good time. You can find that video. I'll also link it in the description. This is a subtle book, but the terror in it is very real, and it's really an enjoyable read. Check it out if you get a chance. Next up is another subtle classic. This is a more recent book. I think the teens is when this came out, and that is The Hole by Hideko Oyamada. This was incredible. It takes a very simple concept of a woman moving to the small town where her husband grew up and living in the house next to her husband's parents. And everything that happens in this book can be viewed 2 ways. 1, totally normal. 2, totally creepy and insane. Also, the book takes as its central image the story Alice in Wonderland. Really, really scary, incredible, subtle horror novel by Hideko Oyamada. Cannot recommend this one enough. Really, really great read. If I'm counting right, which I never do, this should be the 11th, so it looks like I'm going to do 11 of these. The next book that I want to talk about is my last Paperbacks from Hell find, and that is Pin by Andrew Neiderman. Andrew Neiderman wrote a lot of his own horror throughout the 80s, and then the early death of V.C. Andrews of Flowers in the Attic fame occurred, and he became the ghostwriter of V.C. Andrews. So novels kept coming out in V.C. Andrews' name after her death, and those were written by Andrew Neiderman. This is a strange story. It's got some taboo topics, so make sure that you realize that when you go in. But this is about a brother and a sister who are raised by a doctor, and the doctor has a full-size, like life-size anatomical dummy. And he uses ventriloquism to make it seem like the dummy, who he calls Pin, is talking. And he does this to make his, child patients laugh and stuff like that. But he also uses it to talk to his children about things that he's uncomfortable talking to them about. And it seems, and as these children grow, they start to believe more and more that Pin is real. I did a video talking about this with the Secret Society Red. It's on Virgil's channel. I'll link it here. We had a riot talking about this. We also talked about the 80s movie that came out about this. This is absolutely worth a read just for its strangeness. It's a really, really weird one. Talking dummy. It's great. Here's a picture of the thumbnail from the Secret Society Red, which was the first thumbnail that I ever used real pictures of me and other people in, and I'm very proud of it. That is the step back art from inside the novel Pin. That kind of weird family photo with the anatomical dummy there, and then I added myself and Virgil and Brian to the family photo. Was a very good time. Again, that link for that will be down in the description. All right, there you go. 10 very strange horror novels that you can read this spooky season that won't let you down. Let me know if you plan to read any of these in the comments. Let me know if you've read any of them, thoughts on it. And yeah, I will see you on the next one.